Welcome to In Case You Wanted to Know. My name is John. We have Derek in the house. And as always, the inimitable Mr. Jim Henderson. How are you, fellas?
We're doing just fine. Good to see you guys.
Yeah. Do you come up with different words, like research words for Jim before we do these? You do?
Yeah.
Okay.
I put more research into the descriptives for Mr. Henderson than anything else.
That's good. It's good effort. What are we talking about today?
Well, my understanding, the memo was circulated that we're going to discuss geothermal today.
What is geothermal? Yeah, it seems like a worthwhile adventure, especially for those who live in cold weather climates. We did allude to this in a previous podcast, and Jim is going to paint a picture for those who want to know.
So let's just get this out straight. Having grown up in northern Maine, we're very, very familiar with the word thermal. And quite often, and I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with thermal underwear.
Never heard of them.
You did too.
Am I being sarcastic? Am I not? How will we ever know?
Thermal underwear, the long johns.
The long john? Yeah.
Your legs and arms, you put that on before you put on the rest of your clothes. And so
you get the little flap in the back, right?
I'm not sure that
the business flap?
Before my time, I think, the flaps.
When I thought of long johns, I'm thinking about the stuff that they wore back in Lit House on the Prairie.
Yeah, that was the early 1900s. Jim isn't that old. Don't insult the man.
So that in itself, I mean, it brings up this image of, cold. I think that is appropriate that in the northern parts of the world, it is energy-wise, more energy is consumed heating homes and businesses and people than in the South. So it is a different type of energy that we look at because of efficiencies. And so, again, making a side-by-side comparison to solar, and I think maybe we can start with that because I think there's probably just as much confusion about geothermal energy as there is about solar energy. And maybe more so because there's a lot I don't know about it because I live primarily in the South and we're working on our fourth solar project right now as we speak. And I've not done a geothermal project. I've thought about it for our warehouse up north, and we have a townhouse, so we probably wouldn't be putting geothermal in for that. I think there's HOA's things against that. But I think that's a great conversation to have. There are some basics that I do know through a little bit of research, but also just common sense, from an engineering perspective and from an energy perspective.
If you've ever observed an erupting volcano or the geysers at Yellowstone National Park, you've seen geothermal energy in action. The Earth's crust is made of rocks and water. Deep below that is a layer of hot, molten rock called magma, which is even hotter than the sun's surface. The heat just over 6 miles below the surface contains 50,000 times more energy than all the oil and natural gas resources in the world. Releasing a small amount of that heat in the right way can create electricity. A well drilled a couple of miles deep can capture the rising hot water and steam. That steam spins a turbine and a generator produces electricity.
You mentioned that a homeowners association may not be as wild about somebody installing geothermal, which makes sense because my very rudimentary understanding of geothermal is drilling down, laying piping underground to take advantage of the lower temperature underground, or I guess depending on the time of year, warmer temperature underground than above ground, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
About 10 feet down, universal around the world, you're going to be at about 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Ground temperature, give or take, depending, northern Alaska versus the equator, it's going to vary a little bit. But on average, 10 or so feet down, you're looking at 55 degrees. So what they've done is they've found a way to capture that temperature. And again, 55, warming something up from 55 to 73, 18 degrees or so, is a lot less energy needed to do that.
Much of the heating and cooling can come from the ground, below the surface, with something called a geothermal heat pump. You see, below the frost line, about 10 feet down, the Earth maintains a nearly constant temperature of 54 degrees. We can tap into this energy to provide heating in the winter and cooling in the summer. Bury a loop of pipes, called a heat exchanger, just below the surface. and fill them with water or a water and antifreeze solution. During the winter months, the air is usually cooler than the temperature below ground. The solution circulates in a loop underground and absorbs the Earth's heat. This heat is brought to the surface and transferred to a heat pump. The heat pump warms the air, and then your regular heating system warms the air some more to a comfortable temperature. Finally, ducts circulate the air to the various rooms. In the summertime, the system works in reverse. When it's hot outside, the temperature below the surface is cooler than the summer heat. So the fluid in the loop absorbs heat in the building and sends it underground. The ground's lower temperature cools it, and it's circulated again and again. Now you're saving money on air conditioning.
The concept is pretty cool when you think about it. If you could find a way to extract that heat, which is a constant 55, and just find a way to get it up to, whatever you're comfortable with, 72 to 74, whatever.
In your case, in your home, it's 0.
Yeah, I don't mind it being a little cooler. But getting back to the geothermal and the practical applications, is it cost effective? I think those are some things that are valid because we've been talking about sustainable homes and sustainable environments and what it takes, what it costs, what's the return on investment. And we just used solar as kind of our guidelines and benchmark. But I think there's a growing interest in the dynamics of geothermal energy. Geothermal, in its truest sense, is converting thermal energy into electric energy. And then those pipes go down 2 miles. So 1 to 2 miles, you're getting into molten type rock. You're extracting heat at a boiling temperature. You bring it up to the surface, it heats water and turns into steam. And now you get your basic steam generated energy, electricity.
If I could interrupt on that front, you mentioned the word concept. It's not a concept. Iceland is the leader in the world in using geothermal. 90% of households in Iceland are heated with geothermal.
Makes sense.
Their
the whole island's an active volcano. You can go down like 3 feet and have a boiling hot magma.
And
so
they're
that's
not
why
the
norm, of course.
Yeah,
but
that's why
sure.
they're doing it. But they use it for obviously electricity, greenhouses, to grow vegetables and fruit, swimming pools, snow melting, fish farming, and numerous industries. But what's cool is if you actually wanted to learn more about this, Zac Efron, he does a show called Down to Earth that's on Netflix, and there's an entire episode where they actually show this being done, the whole process, and the steam coming out, and he was blown away by it. I highly recommend it, but it's not a concept. It is being done with the rest of the world. But the reason why we're doing this podcast is for America, because it is still conceptual here. And and we're way behind the 8 ball compared to the rest of the world.
Well, yeah, and we've talked about that. I mean, you're talking innovation, you're talking pioneering, and you're fighting big energy, big corporations, and consequently big government. There's a lot of money involved in energy, and the consumer. We're not being told what actually can be done. And I think that's great, Derek, that you brought up the Iceland thing. If we could all live there, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
But the 6.8 billion people on the planet can't live in Iceland, not effectively.
But we just need to build vertically.
Yeah, we could do that.
We can all fit.
Yeah, back to that, Derek. I think you're right. Knowledge is everything, and what you don't know is the stuff you don't know, and then research, and then hopefully podcasts like this that can get people engaged and start thinking a little bit more about things. But let's get back to what we do have and what we do know, Derek. I mean, we know that a lot of energy companies are jumping on the solar bandwagon because they're starting to see it. Energy companies, particularly in the South, are putting up massive 100 megawatt solar farms, and using up a lot of valuable land, by the way. And not surprisingly, we're starting to see power companies offering to rent the rooftops of large buildings. We have a partner that owns large warehouses in Chicago. He was down talking to us the other day. I don't know if you were part of that meeting, John,
Mhm.
where he was talking about he's being proposed by the power companies to lease some of those
his roof
buildings. He's got
space,
like
yeah.
1 million square feet, and it doesn't cost him anything. They actually will pay him $1 a square foot to lease the rooftop. And so anyway, back to, again, we digress into solar, but geothermal, again, I think is definitely something that needs to be talked about more. It needs to be brought to the forefront. And it is, again, it's renewable energy. If you can get past the original investment, it's free, right? So the question, again, our listeners are going to ask, and they're going to want to know is what's the return on investment?
Yeah.
And just like solar, geothermal is, again, using the principle up north, because you're trying to warm your house, not so much as cool it. You have those, 6 or 8 weeks in the summer where you can cool it, but that requires a lot less energy than those 3 months of December, January, February, right? Where it's, 0 or -2 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So the tremendous amount of energy. Geothermal makes sense from the practical perspective. And I did do a quick look at what the average cost for geothermal for an average house, 2,000 square feet. And it's about the same as solar here in Florida. So that makes sense. It makes sense in that perspective. So you're looking 5 to 10 years for your payback, depending on what your utility rates are and fuel rates are, because most people use either natural gas or heating oil. That's a term I haven't heard in a while, heating oil. But it's at close to $4 a gallon. It can run you $2 or $3 grand a month for a 2,500, 3,000 square foot house, and that's expensive. But so yeah, the research shows that it's about the same, and it really depends what the homeowner or business is trying to do, Derek. Are you trying to be net zero? And there's a few acronyms out there that I'm just becoming familiar with as we research what a green home or green business is by certain standards. And there's one standard called HERS, the Home Efficiency Rating System, HERS.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it's okay. It's not a HIMS, it's a HERS. So
HIMS
This is not one of those commercials. Yes.
so but anyway, I came across that, and there's a lot of appraisals and realtors and whatnot that are trying to figure out, what's the value in that property based on its efficiency rating. And so again, we're talking about converting conventional houses or building conventional houses, with geothermal or solar. It's the same thing. So there's a rating. It goes to like 150. That's like if you're just trying to heat or cool a shell with no insulation whatsoever, no windows with any R values whatsoever. Basically, a greenhouse is, if you live in a greenhouse, your HERS value is like 150. And so the ultimate is 0. And I think our listeners, those that are wanting to know more, would find it interesting to hear that the 2 houses that we built in our building from the ground up have a 0. And that's almost unheard of. It's a 0. In fact, it's a negative. If you take into the fact that this next house that we're building actually has battery storage so you can charge your car. So now you don't have to have a fuel bill for your car. So you're beyond 0. Your house is costing 0 because you're at negative carbon. You're at 0 carbon with the batteries and with the way we designed the house because of its maximum efficiency. So getting back to geothermal, you can do the same thing. If you have a HERS value close to 0, you likely have an engineered building specifically to insulate against the cold. And then you can have a system that brings you to net zero, in other words, a 0 carbon emission house for the energy it takes to run it. You can have all the highest energy efficient appliances. You could have the best R values in all the windows. You can have all of these things, but if you don't have a way to store it or produce more than you need during the warmer months or cooler months, then it's really going to be hard to get to zero. You might a decent score is anything under 100 from what I hear. So I think that's if you're looking for maximum impact, what's my impact on the environment? And it isn't just ROI, then getting to a zero, in other words, you're producing more energy than the home that you live in or the business that you work in needs to run it in the winter and the summer.
Can we do a game? Can I ask you guys 2 questions and we'll guess if you guys know the answer? So we know that Iceland has 90% of the homes are using geothermal. What percentage of the energy produced in the U.S. is geothermal, do you think?
It's less than 1%.
Correct, 0.4.
Yeah.
One other question for you. The Department of Energy, what percentage do they predict by 2050 will be geothermal energy in the U.S.?
Oh, John, that's you. I answered
I was
the
going to
last
say,
one.
my guess is it's still a small percentage, 5%.
They say 10%, but if I had to guess with the amount of money that oil companies are, throwing at Washington, D.C. and our representatives being, put in a box,
Yeah.
there's no way. There's no way. And so the question is, Jim,
What's the year again, Derek?
2050.
So
Yeah,
gosh,
25 years from now.
Good luck. I hope it all goes well for you guys. I won't be here.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
Statistically, I shouldn't be here, but if I am because of some bionic opportunity that I have to,
We're going to
live
keep you. We're
indefinitely.
going to keep your head alive using geothermal energy, Jim.
Or Futurama. We just lop his head off and
Put it in
then
a jar.
And put it in a jar and spider legs going around. And Jim can continue doing this podcast in 2050. But serious question, though. How, if you are inspired by this podcast and you want to use solar and you want to use geothermal in your life and you care about the environment and you also want to save money, how does one get involved to get started? You mentioned grassroots in the last podcast.
Yeah, it's 100% grassroots, Derek. Yeah.
20%. What is grassroots? What can people do in their daily lives? Like, how can I get started if I wanted to start doing this?
Well, before Jim answers, I'm gonna step out there and say, if you're interested, well, specifically in geothermal, like we're talking about, it's probably going to be a lot more difficult to take that step, at least here in South Florida, where we are. Up north in New England, they're doing it, and yes, there's geothermal here, but it'd be a far easier task to find somebody to put solar on your home than it is to build a geothermal system, I would think. I hope I'm wrong about that, but
yeah, no, I think, John, you raise a good point, and it's hard, Derek, to answer the question of what people can do. I think first and foremost, read up on it. Take a few minutes and read about it. 2, look at your life situation. Where are you right now in your life? And I'm just thinking of buying a house. I just bought a house. I'm thinking of building a house. I mean, those are the 3 things, that you look at and say, my number one energy use is to and from work and at home, right?
Yeah, probably heating and cooling your home.
And yes, you can recycle all the plastic, you can recycle all the metal, and that's better than doing nothing. But what we're talking about, Derek, is monumental. It's huge. It's a big investment, but it has the biggest reward for the planet down the road. And so the return on investment isn't about your future, Derek, or yours, John, or mine. It's about the children and their children. And so if you look at least one more generation, if not 2, what can I do to impact that?
And on that note, let's put a pin in this. And always appreciate the knowledge, appreciate talking to guys that can also admit when they don't know everything about it, like geothermal. This is all new to all of us. I mean, Jim, with your experience in renewables, you're more educated than Derek and I, but I think we both appreciate the fact that you can say, you know what, I don't know much about this, and that it's and we're all learning all the time.
I probably should put a disclaimer about anything I said about geothermal, because I've never installed the geothermal, so I don't really know. I just sort of know from what I can read and what makes sense. But so don't sue me if I said something that isn't completely accurate, but I think
Don't worry. In the descriptive for this podcast, it'll start with a big asterisk. These guys don't know what they're talking about.
We're just some guys talking about silly things. There might not be complete accuracy, but it's pretty close.
Well, we'll make sure we'll be the first ones to tell you if we're not certain about our accuracy. And on this topic, we are not certain about our accuracy. So do your research.
Don't sue us.
That's right. All right,
guys.
gentlemen. Always a pleasure.
Thanks.